The dust devil that tore through Wilcox, Arizona on that scorching August morning in 1882 seemed to spiral directly toward Olivia Winters as she stood outside the general store, and the townsfolk watching from their windows whispered that even the wind itself knew she was cursed. Olivia had heard the whispers her entire 22 years of life, heard them grow louder after her mother died bringing her into this world, heard them become shouts when her father was trampled by horses when she was 7, and heard them turn to gospel truth when the barn fire took her uncle's life the winter she turned 16. Reverend Josiah Blackthorne had stood in his pulpit just last Sunday and declared her a vessel of misfortune, a woman touched by darkness, and warned every God-fearing soul in Wilcox to keep their distance lest her curse spread like wildfire through their community. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the oppressive heat and kept her eyes down as she walked through the dusty street. The coins in her pocket were barely enough for flour and coffee, but they would have to last. Ever since the Reverend's proclamation, nobody would hire her for washing or mending, and Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house had asked her to leave by the end of the month. Olivia had nowhere to go and no one to turn to, but she had survived worse. At least, that was what she told herself every morning when she woke in that tiny room with its cracked mirror and threadbare quilt. The general store fell silent when she entered. Mr. Patterson was helping a rancher's wife select fabric, and both turned to stare. Olivia felt the familiar burn of shame in her chest but lifted her chin slightly. She would not cower. Whatever curse supposedly followed her, she had never wished harm on anyone. The tragedies that marked her life had carved deep wounds in her own heart, and she carried her grief like stones in her pockets. "I need flour and coffee," she said quietly, placing her coins on the counter. Mr. Patterson looked at the coins, then at her, then at Mrs. Dawson, who was watching with barely concealed disdain. "I think perhaps you should shop elsewhere, Miss Winters. There is nowhere else. This is the only store in town. Then perhaps you should consider another town." His words were cold, final. Olivia stood there for a long moment, feeling the familiar sting of tears threaten but refusing to let them fall. She reached for her coins, but a deep voice from behind her stopped her hand. "The lady was here first. I can wait my turn." She turned to find a tall man standing in the doorway, his broad-shouldered frame backlit by the harsh sunlight. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn hat, and when he stepped inside, she could see his face clearly. Strong jaw shadowed with several days of beard growth, eyes the color of creek water in summer, and an expression that was neither friendly nor hostile, but simply neutral. He looked to be in his late 20s, with the weathered skin of someone who spent his life outdoors. "Mr. Hayes," Mr. Patterson said, his tone immediately more respectful. "I did not see you there. I was just explaining to Miss Winters that we are unable to serve her at this time. Unable or unwilling." The man, Hayes, walked closer and looked at the coins on the counter. "Her money looks good to me. Same silver as anyone else's." "It is not about the money," Mrs. Dawson interjected, her voice sharp. "It is about protecting this community. Reverend Blackthorne has made it very clear that this woman brings misfortune wherever she goes. My husband works at the lumber mill, and I will not have him exposed to whatever evil follows her around." Hayes looked at Olivia then, really looked at her, and she forced herself to meet his gaze even though everything in her wanted to run. She saw him take in her worn dress, carefully mended in several places, her too thin frame, the dark circles under her green eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She wondered what judgment he would pass, what condemnation he would add to the growing list. "Seems to me," he said slowly, turning back to Mr. Patterson, That the only evil in this store right now is the kind that lets a woman go hungry because of superstitious nonsense. He pulled out his own money and added it to Olivia's coins. Give the lady her flour and coffee and add some salt, beans, and bacon to that order, and a jar of that peach preserves. Mr. Hayes, I really must protest. You must do nothing except your job, which is selling goods to paying customers. Hayes's voice had not risen, but there was steel in it now. Unless you want me to mention to the other ranchers that you are picking and choosing who you will serve based on the ravings of a preacher who probably has not done an honest day's work in his entire life. The store went silent. Mr. Patterson's face turned red, then white, then settled somewhere in between. After a long moment, he began gathering the items Hayes had requested. Mrs. Dawson made a disgusted sound and swept out of the store, her fabric forgotten on the counter. Olivia found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. You do not have to do this. I do not want your charity. Not charity, Hayes said, glancing at her. Just common decency, which seems to be in short supply around here. He paused, then added, My name is Benjamin Hayes. I have a cattle ranch about 10 miles north of town, and I do not believe in curses. You will, she said quietly. Everyone does eventually. Something flickered in his expression, something that might have been curiosity or might have been pity. She could not tell which, and she was not sure she wanted to know. Mr. Patterson finished bagging the supplies with jerky, resentful movements and shoved them across the counter. Benjamin gathered them up and handed the bag to Olivia. Thank you, she managed, her throat tight. He tipped his hat slightly. Where are you staying? I will walk you back. The boarding house on Cedar Street. But you really do not need to. I know I do not need to. I am offering. He held the door open, waiting. Olivia stepped out into the blazing heat, too aware of the eyes watching from windows, the conversations that would start the moment they turned the corner. Benjamin Hayes walked beside her, his boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. He did not try to make conversation, and she was grateful for that. She did not know what to say to this stranger who had defended her when no one else would. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the siding, and the front steps creaked ominously under their weight. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway before they could knock, her thin face pinched with disapproval. Miss Winters, I thought I made it clear that you were not to bring trouble to my establishment. I brought supplies, Olivia said evenly. No trouble. You are trouble just by existing, according to Reverend Blackthorne, and I will not have it said that I harbored you when decent folk are trying to live Christian lives. Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms. I want you out by tomorrow morning, not the end of the month. Tomorrow. Do you understand? Olivia felt something inside her crack, just a little. She had known this was coming, but tomorrow gave her no time to find anywhere else to go. Mrs. Henderson, please. I have nowhere. That is not my concern. You should have thought of that before you brought your curse to my doorstep. The landlady's eyes shifted to Benjamin. And you, Mr. Hayes, would be wise to keep your distance from her. Nothing good comes from associating with Olivia Winters. Nothing good at all. Benjamin was quiet for a moment, and Olivia braced herself for him to agree, to hand over the supplies and walk away like everyone else always did. Instead, he said, Madam, I have faced down stampedes, drought, bitter winters, and more than a few men who wanted to shoot me over card games. I reckon I can handle whatever you think this lady might bring my way. He turned to Olivia. Do you have much to pack? She stared at him. What? Your belongings. How much do you have to pack? I do not understand. I have a ranch. It is a good-sized spread, been in my family since my grandfather homesteaded it back in '58. My mother passed 2 years ago, and the house has been feeling mighty empty since then. I could use someone to help with cooking and such, and you need a place to stay. Seems like a fair arrangement to me." Olivia's heart began to pound. "You want to hire me? If you are willing to work for room and board plus a small wage, yes." "Mr. Hayes, you heard what the Reverend said. You heard what everyone says. Bad things happen to people around me. I do not know why, but they do, and I would not wish that on anyone, especially someone who has been kind to me." Benjamin looked at her steadily, and she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen in a very long time, a complete absence of fear. "Miss Winters, I buried my mother after she fought consumption for 6 months. I lost my younger brother to a rattlesnake bite when he was just 14. My father drowned crossing a swollen river when I was 19. I have lived through plenty of tragedy, and none of it had anything to do with you. Bad things happen in this life. That is just the way of it, but that does not mean we stop living or stop helping each other when we can." She wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from whatever darkness seemed to follow her, but the truth was that she was desperate. Tomorrow she would be on the street with nowhere to go, and the Arizona desert was not kind to women alone. She looked down at her worn boots and made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. "I do not have much to pack. It will not take long. I will wait here." Olivia hurried upstairs to her small room, her mind spinning. She owned one other dress, a few undergarments, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small Bible that her father had given her before he died. Everything fit into a single carpet bag that she had carried from one temporary home to another for years. She took one last look around the room that had been her shelter for the past 8 months, then went back downstairs. Benjamin took the carpet bag from her without comment, and they walked to where his horse was tied outside the general store. He secured the bag to the saddle, then turned to her. "Have you ridden before?" "Not often. The ranch is too far to walk in this heat. You will ride with me." He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his hand down to her. Olivia hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused, and he pulled her up behind him with no apparent effort. She settled onto the horse's back, very aware that she had to put her arms around his waist to steady herself. She could feel the heat of him through his shirt, solid and real, and smell the scent of leather and sage and honest sweat. "Hold on tight," he said, and then they were moving. They rode out of Wilcox with the eyes of the town following them, and Olivia knew that by sunset everyone would be saying that Benjamin Hayes had made a terrible mistake, that he had signed his own death warrant by taking in the cursed woman. She closed her eyes against the thought and focused on the rhythm of the horse's gait, the endless blue sky above, and the strange, fragile hope beginning to bloom in her chest. The ride took over an hour, and by the time they reached the ranch, Olivia's legs were cramped and her back ached from the unfamiliar position. But when Benjamin helped her down and she looked around, she felt something shift inside her. The ranch was beautiful in its stark, practical way. A sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, a large barn, corrals with several horses, and in the distance she could see cattle grazing. Mountains rose up in the background, purple and hazy in the afternoon heat. "It is not much," Benjamin said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it is home." "It is more than I have had in a very long time," Olivia said honestly. He showed her inside, and she was struck by how clean everything was despite the fact that he clearly lived alone. The kitchen was spacious with a good stove. The sitting room had comfortable furniture and a stone fireplace, and upstairs there were 4 bedrooms. He took her to the smallest one, which faced east and had a window that looked out over the desert. "This was my sister's room before she married and moved to California. You can use it for as long as you need." Olivia set her carpetbag down on the bed, running her hand over the quilt that covered it. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me." Benjamin leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "When I was 20, I got into some trouble in a town up north. Nothing too serious, but I was young and stupid and running with the wrong crowd. I was in jail waiting for the circuit judge, convinced my life was over, when a rancher named Thomas Whitfield paid my bail and offered me a job. He said everyone deserves a second chance, and some people never even get a first one. He taught me everything I know about running cattle, and when he died, he left me enough money to buy out my father's debt on this place and start building it up proper." He paused, looking out the window at his land. "I asked him once why he helped me, and he said it was because he could. Because he had the means and the opportunity, and turning away from someone in need was not the kind of man he wanted to be. I have tried to live by that ever since." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. Just pull your weight around here and we will call it even." He straightened up. "I need to check on the herd before dark. There is food in the larder if you are hungry, and you can settle in however you like. I will be back before sunset." After he left, Olivia stood in the small bedroom for a long time, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been facing homelessness and starvation, and now she was standing in a clean room in a solid house with a job and a chance at something that felt dangerously close to hope. She did not trust it. In her experience, good things did not last. But for now, for this moment, she would allow herself to breathe. She unpacked her few belongings, then went downstairs to explore the kitchen. Benjamin had not been exaggerating about the food. There were potatoes, onions, dried beans, flour, sugar, coffee, and even some canned goods. She realized with a start that she had not eaten since yesterday morning, and her stomach was growling. She built up the fire in the stove and started preparing a simple meal of fried potatoes and onions, using some of the bacon from the supplies Benjamin had bought. When he returned just as the sun was setting, the house smelled like food and coffee, and Olivia had set 2 places at the kitchen table. He washed up at the pump outside, then came in and looked at the table with something like surprise. "You did not have to do this tonight. I figured you would be tired. I was hungry, and it seemed foolish to cook just for myself when you need to eat too." She poured coffee into 2 cups. "Besides, you hired me to help with cooking. Might as well start." They sat down to eat, and for the first few minutes neither of them spoke. Olivia was acutely aware of how strange this was, sitting at a table with a man she had only just met, in a house far from town, with no one to vouch for her character or his. If her situation were different, if she were a proper lady from a good family, this would be scandalous. But her situation was not different, and propriety had stopped being a concern for her years ago. "This is good," Benjamin said finally. "I am not much of a cook. I can manage not to starve, but I have never had the knack for making things taste like anything other than survival. My aunt taught me before she married and moved away. She said a woman who could cook and keep a house would never want for work." Olivia took a sip of coffee. She was wrong about that, as it turns out. The people in town are scared. Fear makes people cruel. "Do you really not believe in curses?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Not even a little." Benjamin was quiet for a moment, considering. "I believe that sometimes bad things happen in clusters, and people look for patterns to make sense of it. I believe that loneliness and grief can feel like curses when you are in the middle of them. But I do not believe that you, specifically, cause bad things to happen just by existing. That is not how the world works. How can you be so sure? Because if curses were real, if people could carry misfortune like some kind of disease, then the world would make even less sense than it already does. Good people would be afraid to help anyone, afraid to love anyone, afraid to live. And that is no kind of world at all. Olivia looked at him across the table, this strange, kind man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. "I hope you are right." "So do I," he said with a slight smile. "Otherwise, I just made a very poor business decision." Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling back. It felt strange on her face, unfamiliar, like a muscle she had forgotten how to use. But it felt good too, like maybe something inside her that had been frozen for a very long time was beginning to thaw. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Olivia with its simplicity. She rose early to make breakfast, packed food for Benjamin to take when he rode out to check the cattle, spent her days cleaning and mending and preparing meals. The house had been neglected in small ways since his mother died, and Olivia found satisfaction in bringing it back to order. She washed curtains that had gone gray with dust, scrubbed floors until they shone, weeded the small garden behind the house that had gone wild with neglect. Benjamin was gone most days from dawn until dusk, working the ranch with the help of 2 hired hands who came and went and barely spoke to Olivia beyond polite nods. In the evenings, they would eat together, and slowly, gradually, they began to talk. Not about anything important at first, just small things. The weather, the cattle, the state of the garden. But as the days turned into weeks, the conversations deepened. She learned that he had always wanted to raise horses in addition to cattle, that his favorite time of day was dawn when the world was still and quiet, that he had a weakness for his mother's apple pie recipe that he had never managed to recreate properly. He learned that she loved to read but rarely had access to books, that she had always wanted to see the ocean, that she remembered almost nothing about her mother except the sound of her singing. One evening, about 3 weeks after she had arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set in a spectacular display of orange and purple when Benjamin said, "The hands told me there has been talk in town." Olivia felt her stomach clench. She had been waiting for this, expecting it. "What kind of talk?" "The usual kind. That I have lost my mind. That something terrible is going to happen because I took you in. Reverend Blackthorne has been preaching about the dangers of defying God's warnings." He paused. "There was also talk about whether you and I are conducting ourselves properly out here alone." Heat flooded Olivia's face. "I can leave. I do not want to damage your reputation. My reputation can survive some gossip. I am more concerned about yours. I have no reputation to damage. Everyone already thinks the worst of me." Benjamin turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Then we make it proper, we get married." Olivia's heart stopped. "What? Think about it. If we are married, no one can say anything about you living here. You would have legal protection, a real home, a name that is not associated with all the tragedy that has followed you. And I would have someone to help run this place, someone to talk to in the evenings. We get along well enough. It could work. You want to marry me because of convenience." Olivia could barely process what she was hearing. "I want to marry you because I like having you here, because the house feels alive again in a way it has not since my mother died, because you work harder than anyone I have ever met and never complain. Because when you smile, which is not often enough, it feels like seeing the sun come out after a long storm." He looked away, suddenly self-conscious. "But if you prefer, we can call it convenience." Olivia stood up, her hands shaking. "Benjamin, you do not understand. Everyone I have ever cared about has died, everyone. I cannot risk that with you. I cannot carry that guilt. You did not kill them, Olivia. Life killed them. Accidents and disease and bad luck killed them. You were just there. You do not know that. Yes, I do." He stood too, facing her in the fading light. I know that you are not cursed. I know that you are strong and brave and have survived things that would have broken most people. I know that I sleep better knowing you are in this house. And I know that I want you to stay, not as hired help but as my wife, if you will have me." Olivia looked at him, really looked at him, saw the earnestness in his eyes, the hope, the quiet determination. Part of her wanted to run, to protect him from whatever darkness seemed to follow her. But another part, a part that had been lonely for so long it had almost forgotten what connection felt like, wanted to stay more than anything in the world. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "and something happens to you, I will never forgive myself. And if you say no and spend the rest of your life alone because you are too afraid to let anyone in, will you forgive yourself for that?" She had no answer to that. After a long moment, she said, "Yes, I will marry you." Benjamin's face broke into a wide smile, and she realized it was the first time she had seen him look truly happy. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "We will go into town tomorrow and talk to the justice of the peace, not the reverend. I will not have him anywhere near our wedding. The whole town will be furious. Let them be furious. They are already talking. Might as well give them something real to talk about." They were married 3 days later in the justice of the peace's office with his wife and one of Benjamin's hired hands as witnesses. Olivia wore her better dress, which Benjamin had insisted on buying her from the general store, despite Mr. Patterson's obvious reluctance to serve them. It was simple, a dark blue cotton that brought out the green in her eyes, but it was new and clean and hers. Benjamin wore his Sunday best and looked uncomfortable in the starched collar, and when the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her gently, briefly, and she felt her whole world shift on its axis. The town reacted exactly as expected. Reverend Blackthorne gave a sermon about fools who invite damnation into their homes. Women crossed the street when they saw Olivia coming. Men muttered that Benjamin Hayes had always been too independent for his own good, and now he would pay the price. But Benjamin seemed utterly unconcerned with their opinions. He introduced Olivia as his wife with quiet pride, and if anyone dared to say something directly insulting in his presence, his stare was usually enough to silence them. The first few weeks of their marriage were awkward in ways Olivia had not anticipated. They had developed an easy friendship before the wedding, but now there was a new dimension to their relationship that neither of them seemed sure how to navigate. They slept in separate rooms, Benjamin insisting that she should take as much time as she needed to feel comfortable. They worked side by side during the day, ate meals together, sat on the porch in the evenings, but there was a tension now, an awareness that had not been there before. It was Olivia who finally broke the stalemate. One night, about a month after their wedding, she knocked on Benjamin's bedroom door. He opened it looking concerned, dressed in just his pants and undershirt. "Is something wrong?" "No, yes, I do not know." She took a breath. "We are married, Benjamin, but we are living like strangers who happen to share a house. I do not know what you want from this marriage, but I know what I do not want. I do not want to spend my life afraid to let you in." Benjamin studied her face for a long moment. "What do you want, Olivia?" "I want to be your wife, really your wife, in every way that matters." He reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his touch gentle. "Are you sure?" "I have not been sure about anything in years, but I am sure about this." He kissed her then, not gently like he had at their wedding, but with a passion that made her knees weak. She kissed him back, pouring years of loneliness and longing into it, and when he pulled her into his room and closed the door, she went willingly. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies in the lamplight, and Olivia felt something inside her crack open. She had thought herself broken beyond repair, but in Benjamin's arms, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be whole again. Afterward, lying in his bed with her head on his chest and his arm around her, she whispered, "I am falling in love with you. I did not think I could, but I am." "Good," he murmured into her hair. "Because I have been in love with you since the day I saw you in that store refusing to be cowed by people who should have known better." "That is impossible. You did not even know me." "I knew enough. I knew you had courage. Everything else has just been confirming what I saw that first day." Olivia closed her eyes and let herself believe him. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. The seasons changed, and autumn brought cooler temperatures and the hard work of preparing for winter. Benjamin taught Olivia to ride properly so she could help move cattle when needed. She learned to mend tack and even to shoot, though she never quite got comfortable with the rifle. They worked together to put up preserves from the garden, to stock the larder, to make sure there was enough hay for the horses and cattle. The town continued to whisper, but the whispers had less power now. Olivia had Benjamin and Benjamin had the ranch, and together they had built something that felt like a real life. She still had nightmares sometimes, dreams where everyone she loved died and she was left alone again, but Benjamin would wake her gently and hold her until the fear passed. In November, Olivia realized she had not bled in 2 months. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, but when a 3rd month passed and her body began to change in small but unmistakable ways, she could not hide it any longer. She told Benjamin one evening after dinner, the words coming out in a nervous rush, "I think I am with child." Benjamin went very still. "You think? I am fairly certain. The signs are all there." He stood up slowly, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. Then he hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face. "I am going to be a father. Yes, if everything goes well." She could not keep the fear out of her voice. "Benjamin, my mother died in childbirth. What if you are not your mother, and you are not cursed? This baby is a blessing, Olivia, our blessing." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "I am not going to lose you, do you hear me? I am not going to lose either of you." She wanted to believe him, but the fear that had lived inside her for so long was hard to shake. Still, as the weeks passed and her body changed, as she felt the first flutters of movement that became increasingly strong kicks, she began to let hope in. Benjamin was attentive to the point of being overbearing, insisting she not lift anything heavy, that she rest more, that they bring in a woman from a neighboring ranch to help with the heavier chores. Winter came, and Olivia spent more time inside as her pregnancy progressed. She sewed baby clothes and prepared a cradle that had been Benjamin's when he was born. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future. And slowly, the fear began to recede, replaced by a cautious joy. But Wilcox had not forgotten about her, and Reverend Blackthorne had not forgiven Benjamin for defying his proclamation. In late February, when Olivia was heavily pregnant and waddling more than walking, Benjamin came back from town with a grim expression. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "The Reverend has been preaching about us again, saying that any child born to you will be touched by evil, that the town needs to be protected from the spread of your curse." Olivia felt ice flood her veins. "What does that mean?" "I do not know. But some of the men in town have been drinking and talking, and the talk has been ugly. I want you to stay here at the ranch until after the baby comes. No going into town, not even with me. Benjamin, you are scaring me. I am sorry, but I need to know you are safe. Promise me you will stay here." She promised, though it made her feel trapped. The ranch hands who had warmed to her over the months were told to keep an eye on the house when Benjamin had to be away. Olivia tried to stay calm for the sake of the baby, but she could feel the old fear creeping back in, the sense that disaster was always just around the corner. The baby came on a cold March night with wind howling outside and Benjamin pacing the floor downstairs while Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife who served as midwife, attended to Olivia. It was long and painful and terrifying, and there were moments when Olivia was sure she would die just like her mother had. But she did not die. She fought through every contraction, every wave of pain, until finally, just before dawn, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "It is a boy," Mrs. Patterson said, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Olivia's chest. "A healthy boy." Olivia looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect fingers and his eyes squeezed shut against the light, and felt love so fierce it took her breath away. She had created this. She and Benjamin had created this perfect little person, and he was alive and healthy and real. Benjamin burst into the room moments later, having apparently ignored Mrs. Patterson's instructions to stay downstairs. He looked at Olivia, then at the baby, and his face crumpled with emotion. "He is perfect," he breathed. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him William, after Benjamin's father, and called him Will. He had Benjamin's eyes and Olivia's dark hair, and he cried lustily when hungry and slept peacefully when content. Olivia had never known she could love something so much, had never known that her heart was capable of holding this much feeling. Every time she looked at Will, she felt gratitude so overwhelming it brought her to tears, but her happiness was tempered by worry. She was hypervigilant about the baby's health, checking on him constantly to make sure he was breathing, terrified that her supposed curse would somehow touch him. Benjamin tried to reassure her, but even he seemed more cautious than usual, more protective. They kept to the ranch even more than before, avoiding town whenever possible. When Will was 3 weeks old, the trouble they had been dreading arrived. Benjamin was out checking the cattle when Olivia heard horses approaching the house. She looked out the window and felt her heart sink. Reverend Blackthorne was riding up the path, accompanied by half a dozen men from town, all of them armed. She grabbed Will from his cradle and held him close, her mind racing. The ranch hands were out with Benjamin. She was alone. She locked the door and stepped away from the window, trying to think. The Reverend's voice carried clearly through the door. "Mrs. Hayes, we know you are in there. We have come to talk to you about the child." "I have nothing to say to you," she called back, hating how shaky her voice sounded. "Leave my property." "This is not about property, woman. This is about the safety of this community. You have brought a cursed child into this world, and we cannot allow that evil to grow and spread. Give us the boy, and we will make sure he is raised properly, away from your influence." Horror washed over Olivia. They wanted to take her baby. They actually wanted to take her son from her because of their superstitious fear. "You will not touch him. He is my child. He is an abomination born to a cursed woman. We are doing God's work here, Mrs. Hayes. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Olivia looked around frantically for anything she could use as a weapon. The rifle was by the door, but she had never been a good shot, and there were 7 men outside. Even if she could hit one, the others would overpower her. She needed to stall, needed to give Benjamin time to return. "You call yourself a man of God," she shouted, backing toward the kitchen where there was a knife. "What kind of God demands that a child be torn from his mother? A just God, a righteous God, one who does not tolerate evil in his flock." Will started to cry, sensing her fear, and Olivia bounced him gently while keeping her eyes on the door. She could hear the men moving around outside, testing the windows. One of them was trying to force the back door. She ran to it and braced it with a chair, but she knew it would not hold long if they really wanted to get in. She heard a cracking sound and the back door shuddered. They were breaking it down. She had seconds, maybe less. She held Will tighter and looked around for somewhere to hide, somewhere to protect him, but there was nowhere to go. Then she heard a gunshot, and everything went quiet. Benjamin's voice rang out, hard and cold in a way she had never heard before. "The next man who touches my house will not get a warning shot." Olivia ran to the front window and looked out. Benjamin was there on his horse, rifle in hand, positioned between the house and the Reverend's group. The two ranch hands were behind him, also armed. They were outnumbered, but Benjamin did not look like a man who cared about the odds. "Mr. Hayes," the Reverend said, his voice smooth and reasonable, "we are trying to do what is best for everyone, including you. This woman has brought nothing but trouble, and now she has cursed an innocent child with her very presence. Let us take the boy, and you can still have a normal life. If you think I am going to let you anywhere near my son, you do not know me at all." Benjamin's voice was steady, but Olivia could see the tension in his shoulders. "You have 10 seconds to get off my land before I start shooting, and I promise you, I will not miss. We are 7 to your 3. I only need 1 bullet for you, Reverend. The rest of your men can decide if they want to die for your twisted interpretation of Scripture." There was a long, tense moment where nobody moved. Then one of the men with the Reverend, a farmer named Jenkins, lowered his gun. "I did not sign up to shoot a man defending his family." "This has gone too far. Stand firm," the Reverend hissed. "God's work requires God's work does not involve terrorizing a woman and her newborn baby," Jenkins interrupted. He turned his horse around. "I am done with this." 2 other men followed him, and suddenly the Reverend's group was down to 4. Benjamin kept his rifle trained on Blackthorn. "Your choice, Reverend. You can leave now with your dignity such as it is, or you can see how this plays out. But I promise you, if you make me pull this trigger, I will sleep just fine tonight." Reverend Blackthorn's face was twisted with rage and humiliation, but he was not stupid enough to call Benjamin's bluff. With a final glare at the house, he turned his horse and rode away, the remaining men following him. Benjamin waited until they were out of sight before dismounting and running to the house. Olivia threw open the door and fell into his arms, Will pressed between them, sobbing with relief and residual terror. Benjamin held them both, murmuring reassurances, his own hands shaking now that the danger had passed. "It is over," he said. "I promise you it is over. I will not let anyone hurt you or Will. Not now, not ever." But Olivia knew it was not over, not really. As long as they stayed near Wilcox, there would always be people who believed she was cursed, who saw Will as an abomination. The fear and hatred ran too deep to be solved by one standoff. That night, after Will was asleep and they were lying in bed, Olivia said quietly, "We need to leave." Benjamin was silent for a moment. "I know. I cannot raise our son in a place where people think he is evil. I cannot live waiting for the next time someone decides to do something about the cursed woman and her child." "Where would we go?" Olivia thought about it. "California. Your sister is there. You said it is growing fast, full of people from all over looking for a new start. We could disappear there, be just another family among thousands. This ranch has been in my family for almost 30 years. I know. And I know what I am asking you to give up. But Benjamin, I am so tired of being afraid. I want our son to grow up somewhere he is not hated for something he did not do. I want us to have a real chance at happiness." Benjamin pulled her closer. "Wherever you and Will are, that is home. The land is just land. It took them 2 months to prepare." Benjamin sold the ranch to a cattle buyer from Texas who had been looking to expand. He got a fair price, enough to give them a solid start in California. They packed what they could carry and arranged for the rest to be shipped. The ranch hands were sorry to see them go, but they understood. The day they left, Olivia stood on the porch one last time and looked out over the land where she had found love, where she had become a wife and a mother, where she had started to believe that maybe she was not cursed after all. It hurt to leave, but it hurt less than staying would have. They traveled west in a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 strong horses, while sleeping in a makeshift cradle secured between them. The journey was long and hard, with dust storms and river crossings and nights spent under the stars. But Olivia found herself feeling lighter with every mile they put between themselves and Wilcox. The weight of expectation and fear that had pressed down on her for so long was gradually lifting. They reached California in late summer and made their way to San Diego, where Benjamin's sister Elizabeth lived with her husband and 3 children. She welcomed them with open arms and no questions about why they had left Arizona. She helped them find a small house near the ocean, and Benjamin found work on a large horse ranch where his skills were valued and his past did not matter. Olivia fell in love with the ocean the first time she saw it, just as she had always imagined she would. The endless expanse of blue, the sound of the waves, the salt smell in the air, all of it felt like freedom. She would take Will down to the beach and let him feel the sand between his tiny toes, and she would look out at the horizon and feel grateful beyond words. In San Diego, nobody knew about curses or tragedies. They were just the Hayes family, new arrivals from Arizona. Benjamin was the quiet, hard-working cowboy. Olivia was the young mother who was friendly but kept mostly to herself. Will was the happy baby who smiled at everyone. They went to church, though not Reverend Blackthorn's brand of fire and brimstone, but a small community church where the preacher talked more about love and forgiveness than damnation and curses. As Will grew from baby to toddler to little boy, Olivia watched for signs of the curse she had always feared, but they never came. He was healthy and strong and full of mischief. He loved horses like his father and the ocean like his mother. When he fell and scraped his knees, they healed. When he caught a cold, he recovered. He was just a normal, happy child, and every day that passed without tragedy felt like a miracle. When Will was 3, Olivia realized she was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear, only joy. She had survived one pregnancy, she could survive another. Benjamin was over the moon, hoping for a daughter this time, and Will was excited about becoming a big brother, even though he did not really understand what that meant. Their daughter was born on a spring morning with the sound of waves in the distance, and she came into the world easily, quickly, as if she could not wait to be born. She had Olivia's green eyes and Benjamin's smile, and they named her Sarah after Benjamin's mother. With 2 children and a growing life in California, Olivia finally allowed herself to believe that the curse had never been real, that she had simply been a girl who experienced terrible losses and cruel people had turned those losses into something supernatural and malicious. She had been called cursed by the preacher, but Benjamin had said he was blessed to have her, and time had proven him right. They built a good life in San Diego. Benjamin eventually saved enough to buy a small horse ranch of his own, specializing in training working horses for the ranches and farms that were springing up all over Southern California. Olivia helped with the business, keeping the books and managing the household, and she found that she had a talent for working with the horses too, especially the skittish ones that needed a gentle hand. Will grew into a capable young man who shared his father's love of horses and his mother's quiet strength. Sarah was smart and bold, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. They grew up knowing they were loved, knowing they were wanted, and knowing nothing about curses or prejudice or the town their parents had fled. Years passed in a blur of work and laughter and the comfortable rhythm of family life. Benjamin's hair started to gray at the temples. Olivia found laugh lines around her eyes from smiling too much. Their children grew and thrived. The ranch prospered. One evening, when Will was 15 and Sarah was 12, they all sat on the porch watching the sun set over the Pacific. It had become a family tradition, this end-of-day gathering, and Olivia treasured these moments more than she could ever express. "Ma," Sarah said thoughtfully, "were you and Pa always happy?" Olivia glanced at Benjamin, who was looking at her with the same steady affection he had shown her since the day they met. "No, sweetheart, we were not. There was a time when I was very unhappy, when I thought I would never have a family or a home or anything good in my life." "What changed?" "Your father. He saw me when no one else would. He believed in me when no one else did. He took a chance on me, and it changed everything." Will, who usually preferred action to talking, said quietly, "Sounds like you saved each other." Benjamin smiled. "That is exactly what we did." Later, after the children had gone to bed, Olivia and Benjamin walked down to the beach. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water, and the waves were gentle tonight, just a soft rhythm against the shore. They walked hand in hand, their feet bare in the sand, and Olivia thought about how far they had come from that dusty general store in Wilcox, where a cowboy had defended a woman everyone else had given up on. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Leaving the ranch, leaving Arizona, all of it?" Benjamin stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. Not one. You and Will and Sarah are the best things that ever happened to me. That ranch was just land. This, what we have built together, this is everything." "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now after years of practice. "I do not think I say it enough, but I do. I love you so much, I know, and I love you too, always have, always will." They kissed there on the beach, and Olivia felt the same flutter in her stomach that she had felt the first time Benjamin had kissed her all those years ago. Some things, the good things, never changed. As they walked back to the house, Olivia thought about the girl she had been in Wilcox, scared and alone and convinced that she was cursed. That girl would never have believed that this life was possible, that love and happiness and a family were things she could have. But that cowboy had looked at her and seen something worth saving, and he had been right. She had been called cursed by the preacher, but Benjamin had said he was blessed to have her. And in the end, they had both been blessed. Blessed with love, blessed with children, blessed with a life they had built together against all odds. The curse had never been real, but the blessing was as real as the sand beneath their feet and the stars above their heads, and the love that bound them together. Time continued its march, and their children grew into adults. Will married a rancher's daughter and took over the day-to-day running of the horse ranch, proving to have an even better instinct for horses than his father. Sarah became a teacher, determined to help children learn and grow, and she brought that same questioning spirit to her classroom that she had shown since childhood. Benjamin and Olivia became grandparents, first to Will's son Benjamin Jr., then to Sarah's twins, a boy and a girl. Watching their grandchildren grow, Olivia sometimes thought about the people in Wilcox who had been so convinced that she would bring misfortune to anyone who came near her. If they could see her now, surrounded by children and grandchildren, all healthy and happy and full of life, what would they say? Would they admit they had been wrong, or would they find some other way to explain away the evidence before their eyes? Not that it mattered. Those people and their opinions belonged to another life, one that felt increasingly distant as the years passed. Olivia rarely thought about Wilcox anymore, except as the place where she had met Benjamin. The pain and fear and loneliness of those years had faded, leaving only the memory of the moment when everything changed, when a stranger had stepped forward and said that what everyone else saw as a curse, he saw as a blessing. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Benjamin took Olivia back to the beach where they had walked so many times over the years. It was sunset, the sky ablaze with color, and the beach was nearly empty. He had planned this, she realized, timed it so they would have privacy. 20 years, he said, pulling her close. 20 years since I married the woman everyone said was cursed, and I have not had a single day of bad luck since. Olivia laughed. That is not entirely true. Remember when the barn roof collapsed in that storm? The barn roof was old and needed replacing anyway, and no one was hurt. I am standing by my statement, no bad luck. Then I must admit you were right, about the curse, about everything. Olivia Hayes, are you saying that I was right and you were wrong? His eyes were dancing with amusement. Do not get used to it. This is a special occasion. He kissed her then, long and slow and sweet, and when they pulled apart she saw that his eyes were wet. What is it? She asked, concerned. Nothing is wrong. I am just happy. Happier than I ever thought I would be. You gave me that, Olivia. You and our children and this life we built. I spent a lot of years alone after my mother died, thinking that was just how things would be. Then I saw you in that store and I knew. I knew you were special, knew you were worth fighting for, knew that if I let you walk away, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I knew too, Olivia admitted. I was terrified, convinced that getting close to you would end in disaster. But I knew that you were different from anyone I had ever met. You were kind when you did not have to be, brave when it would have been easier to look away, and stubborn enough not to give up on me even when I had given up on myself. They stayed on the beach until the stars came out, talking about the past and the future, about their children and grandchildren, about dreams realized and new dreams forming. And when they finally walked back to their home, hand in hand as always, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace. She had survived tragedy and cruelty and fear, and she had come out the other side stronger. She had found love in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person, and that love had transformed her life completely. The years that followed were gentle ones. Benjamin and Olivia watched their family grow and expand, celebrated marriages and births, mourned the inevitable losses that come with time. Benjamin's sister, Elizabeth, passed away peacefully in her sleep at 72, and they grieved together, remembering the woman who had welcomed them to California with open arms. But these losses, while painful, were the natural order of things, not the sudden tragedies that had marked Olivia's youth. They were losses softened by love and community, and the knowledge that life, while finite, was also precious and worth celebrating. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Olivia looked around the table at the faces she loved and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not the absence of sorrow or struggle, but the presence of love strong enough to carry you through those difficult times. Benjamin caught her eye across the table and smiled, and she smiled back, a whole conversation passing between them without words. As they grew older, they made sure their grandchildren knew the importance of kindness and standing up for what was right. They told stories, carefully edited for young ears, about their early days together, about how Benjamin had defended Olivia when no one else would, about how they had built a life together through hard work and determination and love. They wanted their grandchildren to understand that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing, but it is always worth doing. Will eventually took over the ranch completely, running it with the same skill and integrity his father had shown. Sarah's school became known as one of the best in San Diego, thanks to her innovative teaching methods and genuine care for her students. Their children made them proud every day, not through grand gestures or remarkable achievements, but through the simple act of being good, decent people who treated others with respect and compassion. Benjamin's health began to decline when he was in his late 60s, a gradual slowing down that they both knew was inevitable. He had lived a hard life, worked long hours in all kinds of weather, and his body was finally demanding rest. But even as his physical strength waned, his spirit remained strong. He still smiled every morning when he woke up next to Olivia, still told her she was beautiful even when her hair had gone completely gray, and her hands were weathered from years of work. "I am not beautiful anymore," she told him once, half joking, half serious. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he replied firmly. "You were beautiful at 22 standing in that store trying so hard to be brave. You were beautiful on our wedding day. You were beautiful holding our babies. You are beautiful now. You will always be beautiful to me." Those words sustained her through the difficult days when Benjamin's health continued to fail, when the doctors said there was nothing more they could do, when she knew with terrible certainty that their time together was coming to an end. But even in the face of loss, Olivia found that she was not afraid the way she had been when she was young. She had learned that love does not end with death, that the impact one person has on another's life continues long after they are gone. Benjamin died on a quiet morning in early spring, surrounded by his family with Olivia holding his hand. His last words were for her. "No regrets, not one. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for saving me." He smiled one last time, squeezed her hand, and then he was gone. The grief was profound, but it was clean grief, free from the complicated guilt and fear that had marked the losses of Olivia's youth. She mourned deeply, missed him terribly, felt his absence like a physical ache. But she also felt grateful. Grateful for the 33 years they had together, grateful for the children and grandchildren they had created, grateful for every moment of love and laughter and simple companionship. Benjamin had given her a life she never thought she could have, and she had given him one in return. That was not a curse. That was blessing upon blessing. In the years after Benjamin's death, Olivia found purpose in her family and in keeping his memory alive. She told her grandchildren stories about their grandfather, about his kindness and his courage and his unwavering belief in doing the right thing. She continued to help at the ranch when she could, though Will was careful not to let her overwork herself. She spent time with Sarah and her family, went to church on Sundays, and on warm evenings, she would walk down to the beach and watch the sunset, remembering all the times she and Benjamin had done the same thing. One day, when Olivia was in her early 80s, a young woman came to the ranch looking for work. She was thin and scared, with desperate eyes, and a story about an abusive husband she had fled. Will was uncertain about hiring her, worried about bringing trouble to the ranch, but Olivia took one look at the girl and saw herself at 22. "Hire her," she told Will firmly. "Give her a chance. Ma, we do not know anything about her situation. What if she needs help and we turn her away because we are too afraid to get involved? Your father would never have forgiven me for that, and I would never forgive myself." Olivia walked over to the girl and took her hand. "What is your name, dear?" "Lucy. Lucy Morrison." "Well, Lucy, if you are willing to work hard and be honest, you have a place here. We will figure out the rest as we go." Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me," Olivia smiled. "Someone helped me once when I needed it most." Helping you is how I pay that forward." Lucy stayed at the ranch, and over time she healed. She fell in love with one of the ranch hands, a good man who treated her with respect and gentleness, and eventually they married and had children of their own. Watching Lucy's transformation from frightened refugee to confident wife and mother brought Olivia deep satisfaction. The cycle of kindness that Benjamin had started all those years ago in Wilcox continued, rippling outward in ways they never could have predicted. Olivia lived to be 91 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She passed away peacefully in her sleep, and at her funeral, person after person stood up to talk about her kindness, her strength, her quiet courage. Lucy spoke about how Olivia had saved her life. Sarah talked about her mother's unwavering love and support. Will remembered how his mother had taught him that doing the right thing was always worth it, even when it was hard. But it was little Benjamin, Will's son, now a man in his 30s, who told the story that brought everyone to tears. He told the story of how his grandfather had met his grandmother in a town that thought she was cursed, how he had defended her when no one else would, and how he had said that if she was cursed, then he was blessed to have her. He talked about the life they had built together, the family they had created, and the legacy of kindness and courage they had left behind. "My grandmother was called cursed by a preacher who knew nothing about her," Benjamin said, "but my grandfather saw the truth. He saw a woman who was strong and brave and worth fighting for, and because he had the courage to stand up for her, all of us are here today. Every person in this room exists because he chose love over fear, because he chose kindness over cruelty. That is the legacy they left us. That is what we need to remember and carry forward." They buried Olivia next to Benjamin in a cemetery overlooking the ocean, and on their shared headstone, Will had these words inscribed: "She was called cursed. He called her blessed. Together they proved that love conquers all." In the years that followed, the story of Olivia and Benjamin became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that sometimes the world gets things wrong, that labels like cursed or unwanted or unworthy are lies told by people who are too afraid or too cruel to see the truth. It became a story about the power of one person's kindness to change a life, and how that changed life can go on to change other lives, creating ripples that extend far beyond anything we can imagine. The horse ranch continued to thrive, passed down through the generations, and every child born into that family learned about their great-great-grandparents who had fled Arizona to build a new life in California. They learned about courage and kindness, and standing up for what is right even when the whole world is against you. They learned that curses are not real, but blessings are, and sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the things that scare us most. And on warm evenings, when the sun set over the Pacific Ocean in brilliant shades of orange and gold, members of the family would gather on the beach and remember. They would remember the woman who had been called cursed and the cowboy who had said he was blessed to have her. They would remember the love that had conquered fear, the family that had grown from one act of kindness, and the legacy that continued to shape their lives generations later. Because in the end, that was the truth that Olivia and Benjamin had proven beyond any doubt. Love is stronger than fear. Kindness is more powerful than cruelty. And sometimes the things the world calls cursed are actually the greatest blessings we could ever hope to receive. The story of Olivia and Benjamin Hayes lived on, not as a tale of tragedy overcome, but as a celebration of love found, life embraced, and a future built on the foundation of two people who had chosen each other when the world said they should not. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that we all have the power to change someone's life, to stand up against injustice, to choose compassion over cruelty. And it was a story that proved once and for all that there are no curses that cannot be broken by love, no darkness that cannot be overcome by light, and no person who is beyond redemption or unworthy of being saved. In Wilcox, Arizona, where it all began, the story had faded into obscurity. Reverend Blackthorne had passed away years earlier, his harsh judgments forgotten by most. The town had grown and changed, and new people with no memory of the girl who had been called cursed moved into the houses and ran the businesses. But in San Diego, California, the story lived on, growing richer and more meaningful with each telling, a testament to the enduring power of love and the simple truth that sometimes, when the world tries to tell us who we are, the most radical thing we can do is believe in a different story. A better story. A story written not by fear and prejudice, but by courage and hope, and the unshakable conviction that every person deserves a chance at happiness, no matter what anyone else might say.